Alright, welcome back to another episode of Swing State Radio. We're going live with episode 2. Today's episode we're going to talk about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, the Mosul Offensive, Trump claims on voter fraud, and if they're true, if they can be supported with facts and evidence, and ObamaCare / MediCare / the single-payer healthcare system, and where do we go from here since the percentages of prices are raising significantly. And I'm Kyle.
And I'm Brian. Welcome back. Let's get started off here with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP. I just wanted to give a description of the TPP to start out, because I feel like a lot of people hear this term TPP, but they really don't even know what it is. I'm assuming you could probably agree with that.
Oh yeah, and I I take it to people don't know what it is because everybody talks about it, but it's a document that's 6,000 pages long. It's 2 million words long, and it's 30 chapters long.
It's it's very dense.
Nobody has the time to go through it and read. I don't even
think normal politicians have time to really even talk about it.
I doubt Obama has even read it himself.
Yeah. Alright, so anyway, it's just a short description of it. It's a trade agreement between 12 different countries, including the U.S., it notably doesn't include China, which kind of makes sense. But the member countries are Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, the United States, and Vietnam. And what it is it's basically just a trade agreement, as we said, which seems to be at least in this election, trade agreements and international trade in general seem to really be frowned upon.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'm full on for free trade, but especially with Trump, and then also I think Bernie Sanders was also.
Well, that's what I just wanted to talk really quickly about free trade in general. This is where I actually deviate from a lot on, well, maybe not Hillary Clinton as much, because I think she's secretly for it, even though she's campaigning right now against it. Oh, yeah. I think that's just a Hillary being political as usual, yeah. But Bernie Sanders was a champion of it earlier in the primaries, and then Trump and Hillary have kind of taken this on because of this movement towards getting the working class vote. However, I personally believe free trade is good, and like you said, you do too. The idea of trade being bad goes against basic economics. Basic economics tell us that trade is good. If you look at comparative advantage versus absolute advantage, the idea is that basically countries trade to optimize what they're good at. So by the U.S. trading with other countries, we're not necessarily losing any jobs per se. We're just optimizing what we are good at and getting more products from these countries that what they're good at. In a sense, that's very basic, a very basic idea of it. That's the idea behind trade in general.
Yeah, if you think about it, when we're trading from an economic standpoint, if we are one of the wealthiest countries in terms of healthcare devices.
Yeah.
And medical devices and
as far as just high tech.
Yeah.
Manufacturing in general, we are kind of at the forefront. We have an absolute advantage in those markets.
Yeah. So when I like to question the Trump voters and the people who support Trump's trade agreements, which I know a lot of the Republicans don't even support that. They just support him because of his low tax policies and everything. And I like to challenge them. What do you think about this? Because if you're imposing high tariffs and we'll say, for instance, dog toys. Say they make dog toys in China for 10 cents. Well, you impose a tariff, and it raises the prices them to import it to $1 instead of 10 cents. And in turn, that won't harbor any effects to basically slow down what Trump is claiming China's ripping us off and stuff like that, it'll screw the consumer. So like those dog toys that were originally 10 cents that to be imported, they're costing $1 now. They're going to upcharge. That's 100% or 1,000% upcharge, and the consumer is going to get it pushed back onto them, and they're going to get 100% upcharge in turn. So the dog toy, instead of being $2 when it gets here, it could be $8, $6. It's a lot more expensive.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring up this idea that, like, our manufacturing jobs are going to China and going to all these places. Well, in a sense, like, China, yes, has increased the steel production, but I think it's like somewhere in the 70-ish percentile, that area. But this guy named Robert Samuelson wrote an article earlier this year, and in the article he describes basically like what's going on in the U.S. and he says, despite plummeting industry employment, U.S. steel production is roughly where it has been for decades, between 90 million and 120 million tons per year. Imports generally represent 20 to 25% of domestic consumption, and it's true that dozens of steel plants have closed, but dozens more are more efficient and have opened. Like, these more efficient plants have basically opened, and productivity has actually increased. He says that from 1990 to 2014, the U.S. has actually performed well in manufacturing compared to other countries, other industrialized countries. So this idea that trade is killing these jobs is not true. It's just an increase in technology and efficiency.
Yeah, and with that, with the increase in technology, it definitely shows that there. And it's been proven through time that with the increase of technology, we're not losing jobs. There's just newer jobs being created. So, say in 10 years, we're going to be all robotic in all these industries and everything. Well, there's going to be someone who has to maintain the upkeep of the robots and build them and help.
Honestly, yeah. And I think, like, where the United States could push for more jobs is in, like you said, high-tech manufacturing, and I think the renewable energy sector is growing at a large rate, like solar energy, wind energy. If we can create jobs within those sectors, I believe that that's where the job creation is, not in like archaic, manufacturing areas like steel and coal and
And so on TPP, I am surprised that you stand with it just because you generally support Bernie Sanders and his ideas, and he's against it. So it'll be a good topic because I'm against it, and there's reasons I'm against it. Basically, you have a document that's 6,000 pages long, 2 million words long, 30 chapters long. It's too long of a document for politicians to read. I don't like we said earlier. I don't know if Obama's even read it. There's not enough time in the year for people who are like truckers, small business owners, assembly line workers, consumers. How are they supposed to comprehend what the hell is in this document? And in my opinion, it's too long, it's too massive, it empowers the government and the bureaucracy, and it empowers other governments and bureaucracies too.
See, where I kind of disagree is that I'm going to go with the idea that we can trust that the people that came up with this had the general interest in mind, and that, obviously the people that were working on it from the American side had America's interest in mind. I know it's a long document, but I don't think that necessarily means that it's a bad document. I think that the idea that, these long documents, yes, it's dense and whatever, but I think that we can trust. We need to place a certain level of trust in the people that created it. If the general idea of it is good and the people that created it have a good outlook on it, and it does have bipartisan support, even though I think people have kind of stepped back that support because of for political reasons. But I think in general it does have bipartisan support. John Kasich, who's a Republican, again, and I actually disagree with most, the progressive side on this. John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, obviously wrote an article in support of it, and he talked about that the TPP has support, and it has support from some of the most respected national security leaders, including Robert Gates, Leon Panetta, Donald Rumsfeld, and former Secretary of State Colin Powell, Madeleine Albright, and James Baker. So this idea, like, I trust those people in the bipartisan support in the idea that the TPP is good. It also, another thing that, like, we don't necessarily talk about is the geopolitical implications it has. You know, Republicans like this idea that, oh, America is losing its status as a world power and we're losing our influence in certain areas, but if
we are generally.
And I mean, we can argue about that at a later date, but I think that people always think of, like, oh, they think of the military when they think that way, but in general, you also have to bring in economics. This plan would link us with other Asian Pacific countries, as well as, like, I know, like, Peru's in that agreement, so, like, even South American countries, and, like, because we're linked through trade and the economy, then that gives us influence. And the fact that China is sitting, like, China, as far as, like, you know, the Trump supporters go and different things, like, China, like, we're losing ground to China. Well, what better way to gain ground against China than to have an economic agreement that ties us to most of the Asian Pacific countries?
See, and that's why I'm worried about this agreement, is because it'll tie us by law to these other countries. And I don't know if you know, but the Pacific area, like the Pacific Ocean, that trade channel is basically our weakest link. And it's one of our least used. So yes, generally speaking, it would be, I mean, I'm all for free trade. And it would be good to trade with these countries. But once again, I want to ask John Kasich. I want to call him tonight and say, hey, what is in this document? Have you read all 2 million words in this document? Because I think it's physically impossible to do that. The Constitution's 4,500 words long, and then after amendments, it's 7,500 words long. And people in government are still trying to screw around with it and act like they don't know what's in the Constitution. So what makes you think that people are going to act like they know what's in this and then immediately after just completely
I think that's what aides are for. You know, you put a team of however many people on this, and they give you the general feedback behind it. You know, I just don't think that because it's a dense document that it is a bad document in a sense.
Well, I'm not saying because it's dense it's bad. I'm saying because it's dense it's untrustable, just because you can write out a trade agreement in 10 pages or less explaining what the agreement's about and how we're going to try to further trade, but within 2 million words and over 6,000 pages, in my opinion, there's going to be something in there that empowers the centralized government more, and it empowers the government to take control of the citizen's life and not let us do certain things, and it will, I mean,
but
I feel like deep down there's something in there that will empower the government and not allow us to trade freely, as they're saying it should.
Yes, but I feel like, yes, and there's a lot of words, but I feel like someone at some point would have found that out. I mean, you know, it's hard to not have a document that big when you have 12 different countries, you know, debating the intricacies of trade, you know?
Well, I mean, do you think these 12 other countries have even read this document? I mean,
Yeah,
yes,
I mean,
yes,
I
we
think,
have AIDS and everything, but people don't have 60 aides to read 100 pages each. I mean, people generally have a couple aides on their team, and
I just find it hard that this thing has both support from the Republicans and support from the president. I don't see how, because, like, I don't see there being, yes, there might be something, but I don't see that there's such a red flag. I feel like if a red flag was hiding in this document, it would be very noticeable, and it would have been picked up. I don't think that in the fine print we're gonna find something that, like, affects the, affects Americans and affects government control to a level that you're saying that it might.
I'm just taking it as like what you were saying. The red flag has to be in there somewhere, and we would see it, but it's so big and vast that it's easily able to scan over, and people aren't gonna be like, oh hey, there's a 2 million page document or 2 million word document. Let's go get all our aides to read this, because this isn't the only thing they're trying to pass right now. They're trying to pass multiple bills, so they can't invest all their time on one trade partnership. And basically, my thought behind it is, so if we go back to the founding fathers and what they said, they wanted 2/3 of the senators present to bring in the full body politic regarding any major agreement with foreign countries, trade, or national security. And they stated no one man should have the power to commit all of the people of the United States to foreign entanglements unless the people of the United States, through the United States Senate, agree to it. And what I'm getting at here is it's too long for the people of the United States to read through and thoroughly understand, for them to speak to their senators and say, hey, I'm for this or I'm against it.
At the same time, I don't think it's... that's why, in a sense, government exists, because we elect these people to make these intricate decisions for us. If we don't agree with what they're doing, then elect new people. But like you said, it's not our job. That's the reason, in a sense, why we have government. It's not our job to sit there and have to read every single document that comes through government.
So let me put it this way:
if that were the case, we'd have a true democracy and not a representative democracy.
Well, we're a representative republic.
What I'm saying,
we're not a true democracy. We're basically,
a true democracy would be every single person votes on every single issue, no matter what it is.
But
we'd have a basically what we do for the presidential elections, we do for literally everything that's passed by government.
Yeah, and that's why we have the 3-tier government system. But my almost final point is, seeing the past 8 years of Obama in office, when has he done anything to support capitalism? He's raised taxes. He's put up barriers between countries like Israel and the United States. He's started wars in Iran. He's allowed Iran to get...
He started wars with Iran.
Not started wars with Iran, but started wars like in the Middle East. And
that'll be something we can bring up in our next topic.
Yeah, we'll bring it up in the next topic. But he hasn't done a single thing to support capitalism. So what makes me and the average voter out there think, hey, this 6,000-page, 2 million word, 30-chapter document is all about capitalism?
I can agree that Obama's policies have not been capitalist, like pro-capitalism in nature, but I think that's because he's a more... if you look at Democrats and progressives in general, that's kind of their stance. And if it was just Obama supporting this, I could see your point, but it has support from national security leaders, Republicans.
See, all the Republicans supporting it, though, are members of, in my opinion, crony capitalism, and are all in with the establishment, or in bed with the establishment, and they don't support what this country was founded on.
Fair. So to wrap up this segment, we both kind of are on the same page for free trade. We both believe in free trade, definitely. And we both don't see the point of what our presidential candidates and even the people in the primary were arguing for, which is a less globalized economy that focuses more on producing everything in the United States. Yeah. We're both kind of on the same page there. Where we see our differences come in basically the fine print.
Yeah.
Not to put out a pun, but basically our differences are in the fine print.
Yeah. And my final point on this is just, as a citizen, I'm not speaking among other citizens, but generally speaking, I'm tired of the government. I'm tired of anything that's 2 million words long. There's plenty of bills like ObamaCare. I mean, it's 6 times longer than ObamaCare, and ObamaCare was really long. I'm tired of the government, and anything this long never empowers the individual, and it never empowers anything.
Right, fair. So the next topic we're going to bring up is, I mean, kind of a current topic, but we're going to try and delve into the issues behind it. We kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the current Mosul Offensive, Mosul being the northern Iraqi city that's currently held by ISIS. We just kind of wanted to talk about what's going on there, and then kind of the whole situation in the Middle East going as far back as the Iraq War.
So I'm not too in-depth with the Mosul Offensive, but generally I've glanced over it a lot and read into it, but generally speaking, I think the White House must not commit this operation unless they're full on and they're convinced that taking Mosul would significantly advance American interests. And so we'll bring this up later, but the strategic kicker in this Mosul offensive is, who is the winner if Mosul is seized? Iran. And obviously we are not really close with Iran right now. We're not the best. We're not in the best relationship, so that's kind of the kicker, and I want you guys to think about that. What if Iran becomes part of Mosul and takes over there? So what could happen there?
I think, looking at what's going on in Iraq and Syria and what's going on with ISIS and everything right now, I think speaks to kind of a larger issue with U.S. policy, foreign policy, as far as like the military and different things like that. I think Obama's outlook and policies as far as military intervention are completely different than, a lot of what we've seen during the Bush administration and things like that.
What, the amazing boots on ground?
Yeah. But, I think this is a lose-lose situation. As far as like ISIS and this in general, I think it's a lose-lose situation no matter what. We put boots on the ground, we've committed troops to another quagmire in the Middle East.
Yeah, and we're basically going to roll up the death count if we put troops on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean...
but I think if you look at we're also, I think what Obama's tried to do over his 8 years is not necessarily increase our standing as a world power, but to kind of say, hey, we're not the enemy. I think with the policies that we had seen, especially through the Bush administration, more and more people, especially in the Middle East, kind of viewed us as like this invading force and the enemy. And I think that's why Obama's kind of had to, he's taken a step back and said, okay, but the issue is at what point do we step in? At what point do we not step in? I think Obama, in this sense, is wrong if he commits troops and wrong if he does what he's been doing. So I feel like it's a lose-lose situation for America no matter what.
Yeah, I think us getting involved in the Iraq War, at the time it was a good idea, because, hey, there's people who literally just blew up the World Trade Center. And that's what we're trying to combat terrorism. But then it kind of got to just moving on, and we could never find now I'm against it, but at the time I was all in for it. I was like, we need to catch...
How old? I mean, that was 2003.
Yeah.
So.
Well, not at the time, but just reading the news and everything, now I look back on it, I was like, yeah, we need to go to war with these people. And now I'm kind of against it just because it really hasn't gotten us anywhere except a high death count with the United States armed forces and everything, and I just feel like it's generally in our interest is best to stay out of it, but for this specific case with ISIS and taking out ISIS, I think we should keep boots off the ground and bomb them. Just Not like going after like to bomb the shit out of them, but
basically keep up our air offensive that we've.
I think we should increase it because our air offensive has been significantly decreased since what it was during the Bush administration. Basically, I think that we had boots on the ground in Iraq and we shouldn't have. And for the war now with ISIS, I think we should keep boots off the ground and limit our death count, but also bomb these cities because these cities are fully controlled by ISIS. It's be known now that a majority of the people living in these cities are fighting for ISIS, and the ISIS people have pushed out or killed and terrorized the people who were living in places like Mosul. And I think we should literally...
I mean, I just read in the news that basically ISIS is using the people that are left as human shields. I think the problem with war is there's so many issues, and there's no... what I've come to believe is that there's no right answer when it comes to it. And, like, when we went in, you know, the Bush administration hyped it up. It was like, we need to get rid of this, blah, blah, blah. Then we had this prolonged war there because, you know, I think people forget that nation-making, which is basically what we did in Iraq. We disposed of the old government and created a new one. But nation-making takes a while. And, you know, we get 10 years into this, you know, we're now 13 years since we first invaded Iraq. You know, 13 years in the history of man is a very short period of time. If you look at American history, it took us more than 13. I mean, think about it. We had the Articles of Confederation first before we even had the Constitution. So it takes a while. And I think Americans just got sick of dealing with it. So when Obama came in, also it's like, all right, we've done what we can, let's get out of there as quick as possible. And I think they've created this gap that has now led to this giant quagmire in the Middle East. And, I mean, I don't know who you blame, but no one wins at this point. And I think, you know, people blame Obama for not being strong with Russia, but, you know, when you have someone like Putin in power in Russia, it's very easy for Russians to just go into Syria, and I think Syria is a lose-lose no matter what. I either see this just going on forever, or honestly, Assad coming back to power. I don't think America is gonna has a winning battle.
Yeah, and I mean it all goes back to us getting involved in the war, which now I believe is a bad idea, and because I think we should have just stayed out of it, let everybody just do their thing over there. The Shiites and the Sunnis can go against each other, whatever. And then Obama came into power and basically went into arming the rebels. And now the rebels, they turned into ISIS. And they're our enemies. So basically, essentially, Obama armed our enemies. So now we got ourselves mixed up in another conundrum. And it's just insane how crazy this has gotten to. And I think essentially, in the end, we should just go after ISIS and take out ISIS, because they're heavily recruiting people who have no trust in the government in America. They're having people who are in America travel to these locations that they're located in, these cities over in the Middle East, come back with a new wife and stuff like that, bringing a new wife who might have radicalized them, like the San Bernardino guy, the killer. Well,
that's another topic. I think that, and we can do a whole other segment on Syrian refugees, but I think, it's just, and I think it goes back to what I said, is America as the enemy, is that these people get radicalized. It's just so dense that I don't want to get into it right now.
Yeah, and my last...
I think basically all I wanted to say was our biggest issue as far as that front is homegrown terrorism more than it is Syrian refugees coming here and wanting to plot against us.
Yeah, and my last note is that the war would not stop with the Mosul offensive. Seizing Mosul would still leave ISIS in control of northwestern Iraq, half of Syria, large swaths of North Africa, and before we again enter into this ground war, we need to clearly define the final objectives of Syria, Iraq, and across the Maghreb, and I think essentially it's just gonna be too prolonged, just like the Iraq War.
Yeah, I think just closing out is that it's so difficult to like define what we should be doing there, and I feel bad for Obama. I feel bad for the next president, whoever it is, that they have to deal with this. But I think, if anything, it can stand as a lesson to American foreign policy and militarism moving forward. All right, so moving on to our next topic, we wanted to bring up one of Trump's most recent kind of outlandish statements to talk about, and that's the idea that the American voting system is inherently flawed and rigged against him. So again, I think we're both going to pretty much agree on this one, having talked about it a little bit already. I think we're both in agreement that it's kind of a little bit of bullshit. But yeah, a little bit of a background on what Trump's talking about here. He said, and basically quoting Pew Research, which I have the Pew Research here. He talked about that there's a 1.8 million records of people who are deceased who are still registered to vote. Some more from that same Pew Research. It says about 24 million voter registrations were significantly inaccurate or no longer valid because people moved, had died, or were inactive voters. About 2.75 million people were registered to vote in more than one state. And outdated technology, shrinking government budgets, and paper-based registration systems contributed to inaccuracies and inefficiencies, my bad. Trump specifically claims that there's, these 300 instances of voter fraud that can be accounted for from 2000 to 2014. And this is what we're kind of going to talk about here. The Washington Post did a fact check, and what they found was that even if these 300 instances were confirmed cases of actual voter fraud, they would make up such a small. Keep in mind this is 2000 to 2014, and that there were more than 1 billion ballots cast in that time period. So it would be such a small proportion of the total ballots cast in that 12-year period, or 14-year period, that it would be preposterous to call voter fraud widespread, or in Trump's words, a big, big problem. The Washington Post then studied, and they found that 31 incidents of specific credible allegations of voter impersonation at the polls happened. And this research came from the Loyola Law School professor Justin Levitt, who had been tracking such data for years. So again, this kind of corroborates what I just said, that, 31 or even 300 out of 1 billion ballots cast is not a issue with the system. It's just, yes, so there's definitely some instances of voter fraud, but there's no, systematic issue with the way America does its voting.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, there are plenty of ways to claim that our elections are rigged. For example, Trump could have talked about or parroted the way Mike Pence said it. His line was that it's rigged, meant only that the media are crazy biased against Trump, which is true. We can agree that it's.
Well, to a certain extent, and this is something that we can talk about to a certain, but yes, there are media outlets are biased. I mean, in general, human beings are biased. You're never going to have
Yes, yes, and
100%
it's
biased
hard. It's
system.
hard
Yeah.
to not show your bias as a journalist.
Yeah.
But
And I will say in the television arena, so like cable news network, there is
Clinton News Network.
well, no, in okay, man, whatever. But in general, the media sources that are on television lean a little bit more democratic. Yes. However, there's other media, and that's what talk radio doesn't say, is that they're media too. So like this idea that media is flawed, and we live in the 21st century where a lot of people get their news from online sources, podcasts, and different things. So you can find like a wide variety across the board.
Yeah, but I'm
for
talking
media.
in general, like the baby boomers. Think of them. They don't know what the hell a podcast is. They don't go online. They don't. I mean, generally they don't listen to talk radio. A lot of them don't. And we can
I'd
agree.
say the majority of talk radio
well,
is
it's 40 and older normally.
Yeah.
35 and older. But generally speaking, when people go to get their news, they're not going to go turn on talk radio and listen for 2 hours. They're going to turn on either Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. And yes, I agree Fox News is biased for Trump, and I think there
Well, I
needs
don't
to
know
be
if Fox News is biased for Trump, but Fox News is definitely a conservative outlet.
not conservative, they're
Okay,
Republican.
Republican outlet.
But yeah, I think this voter fraud case, though, is a bunch of BS. And I'll list three reasons and go into them. So, one is that elections matter when they're duly certified. So, for example, when Bush won the election in 2000, Democrats made the same case that the election was rigged, and then Gore went into it, and
Can
eventually...
Can I respond to that, or you just want to go through?
Well, I'll go through and then you can respond. But
Okay.
Gore basically went into it and was saying that it was rigged and they had a recount. And then Hillary Clinton herself in 2002 said that George Bush was selected rather than elected. And then even last week, well, 2 weeks ago now, she talked about, she didn't talk, the crowd was chanting Gore won, and she just nodded along like it was true. And I think this you when there's so many things going into one basket, people just will, if people believe the elections no longer matter and that votes don't count, there's no escape for like the pressure that builds up during the election process. There's no escape for like, oh well, it was rigged, so we can't do anything about it. The people think that it'll make the people think that this is a normal thing and that elections are always rigged. So, what do you want to respond on the...
So, for the Gore thing, I mean, with the Gore never, like, leading up to the actual election day, threw out this idea that the election was rigged against him. Gore, what happened was, it came down to the state of Florida, and I don't know the exact numbers, but the margin of victory was very small, within a reasonably saying, let's do a recount, So
yeah, no. That's what I'm getting at is Donald Trump is saying ahead of time that he's like in the debate. He was like, I don't know if I'll support her. What he should have said was, there's election rigging and election fraud that has gone on in the past. It is a big deal, and it does happen, but it's not to the widespread account that you you said.
I don't like the term rigging, and I know that like. You can say that both sides have used it. The difference between the instances that you're bringing up and what I'm trying to say is that, yes, there is influencing, quote unquote, influence. Like you can influence an election, but that happens on both sides.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that.
But what I'm concerned about is the idea that Trump is explicitly saying that voting in the 2016 election on November 8th he is explicitly saying that that is rigged, and that no matter what, even if like all the media outsources or media sources were for him, everything like that, that Hillary Clinton would win no matter what.
Yeah, and
that
I
is what
don't,
he's explicitly saying.
I don't agree with that rationale at all. I like he should have done it like Al Gore did. He should have said during the debate, "There's election fraud going on right now, and it has happened in the past, but there are ways to combat election fraud, and I will go through the legal process post-election, just like Al Gore had done." And
Yeah.
there's no.
And that just goes to show that I don't think Donald Trump really understands what he's getting himself into, because he doesn't understand that process. I mean, I think me and you understand that process better than Donald Trump, and we're two college kids.
Yeah, and my second point is it discredits the actual anti-voter fraud cases and kind of says it cries wolf. And Trump seems to make no distinction between a close election and blowout in his language. Because Trump continues to claim that the polls are lying. He'll challenge the legitimacy of an election in which he loses in a landslide fashion. And after all, he was running close. Remember, polls don't matter. And then the bottom fell out thanks to massive fraud. And that's what he's
claiming.
Yeah, that's what he's claiming now. And no, the bottom fell out because media had all this stuff on you. And yes, I think they should have released it earlier during the primaries to give voters a fair opportunity to like, hey, what the hell's going on with this guy? I'm not going to vote for him in the primaries anymore.
Well,
but that's part of...
Isn't that the responsibility of the other Republican candidates to find that information?
And they did. They mentioned it back in May, but
I mean, the fact
people
that,
like the Fox News channel, they like Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly, they were in bed with Trump. They wanted Trump. They're friends with Trump. They wanted Trump to get in. So when Trump had billions of free advertising in the media, getting on Fox
Trump
News.
Trump has also had, as far as like that goes, I mean, Trump has had free advertising, albeit maybe negative, but he's basically had free advertising from all the news outlets.
Oh yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like these news outlets, they complain about Trump, and complain about how terrible he is, but during the primary process, why didn't they bring on other candidates of the Republican Party to give them their free advertising and talk about their policies?
That's true, but at the same time, and I believe it's honestly a brilliant political move, which makes sense because Hillary Clinton's all about, campaigns and politics and all these things, but it was a brilliant political move to wait. They knew exactly what they were doing when they waited to the last month.
That's the exact reason they did.
To start putting this stuff out, because if this stuff had all come out, I mean, this stuff has existed for years, obviously. Like if they would have put all this stuff out in, say, as early, like even as late as say August, it wouldn't matter now because it would have gone through its normal news cycle and it would have been dead by now. But the fact that they have brought all these major issues up in the last month.
It's normally after Labor Day.
Speaking of the class we've taken and the people that have come and talked to us, they said, yes, after Labor Day is when people actually start paying attention to elections. And think about when all this stuff has come out, after Labor Day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on Clinton's part, this was a brilliant political move, and she knew exactly what she was doing. I mean,
I knew...
You can go look at her WikiLeaks emails and know that
I'm not calling myself a conspiracy theorist, but I called it back in October of last year, in August of last year. I was saying, listen, NBC has files on Trump and videos of Trump of him doing things to women that will come out, but it won't come out till after the primaries and close to the general election to help him if he's winning.
I don't know if it was the news outlet specifically that had this information.
Well, NBC.
I think it was.
There was one where
MSNBC. Speaking of news, in my opinion, MSNBC is probably one of the most liberal of the news outlets. So to say that they were withholding something,
no, it was NBC. It was NBC.
Okay.
I talked about this with people back in November of last year, and I was like, I'm not voting for Trump because I've heard reports of there's a woman who has sexual assault allegations against Trump, and there's a whole interview done by NBC back in 2009 or something like that, and they've been holding the interview and never releasing it till now, obviously. and that's it. I mean, voter fraud is a serious problem, but it doesn't represent hundreds of millions of voters.
I think we're not even discussing really voter fraud anymore. We're discussing how the news media influences the election. But I think going back to the basis of this like segment and what we were originally talking about, there is, at the end of the day, the media can say whatever they want. They can put out whatever they want when they want. But the bottom line is, none of that affects how you go into the polls on November 8th. And I mean, it might influence your decision, but it's not directly affecting who. Like, if you vote for Trump, like, these media outlets aren't going to go in there and change your vote on November 9th.
Yeah,
you know?
No, it's not.
So, that is rigging the election, not influencing the election.
Voter fraud is definitely.
And then, yes, and like we've spoken about before, there's instances
but there's not millions of votes.
There's instances of real voter fraud, but yes.
He's literally getting blown out. Like, the polls mattered during the primaries, but now they're rigged.
Yeah. Honestly, if I were Donald Trump, I would have stuck with the line that the media is rigging the election. I think he's stepped back. Yeah, and he stepped back and started saying that again. But the fact that he stood up in a national debate when the most people are watching and said that he would withhold his support until he like proves that it's not rigged.
Yeah.
I think was a stupid move on his part.
I think he should have done what they've done in history and just said, yes, I'll support her, but if I believe something is wrong, I will go through it in the legal process after the election has happened.
Or if it's a close, I mean, the thing is, like, polls are projecting right now that it's going to be a blowout. I agree, if it was a close race and Trump said, hey, we'll see what happens on election day if it comes down to one state and the margins are small, again, like going back to the 2000 election, then we'll look at the possibility of going through the legal process to, make sure that the election goes the right way. But he has literally been blatantly saying that he thinks that there will be widespread voter fraud on election day.
Yeah, and I think this is all leading up to him intending to create a grievance movement. Like, he wants people to feel bad for him. And
he basically wants to sit there. Donald Trump, in his mindset, can never lose. His brand is built on never losing. His life has been built on never losing. And to lose at the biggest stage possible would basically be a huge detriment to his private, enterprises.
Yeah, so, and we can tell, like, the real goal here is for Trump is with his language, he wants to create a civil divide in the Republican Party, which he can capitalize on, both politically and fiscally. And he says the election results are a lie, the media rigging is a thing, and politicians and worked with them. And this means that, so with him saying that media outlets are rigged, politicians are working with the media outlets to rig the elections and create a bias, and that the election results are a lie, there's going to be a new media outlet coming out of this, I think. Personally, I think enter Trump's TV. Like, Trump is going to have his own TV channel out of this to, one, make money, and say that, hey, the media's rigged. I'm going to show you a fair election and fair media and show you everything. And he's doing it now, in my opinion, to bring in future people, like bringing in the Republican Party. He's like creating a divide to bring them in to watch his TV show.
And, I'm not one for conspiracy theories, and this isn't really a conspiracy theory, but there's a lot of speculation that Trump is trying to create this like Trump News Network or Trump TV, and I think what you've seen, but the thing is, if he loses all credibility, and that whole new enterprise goes out the window. I mean, I think you look at, I've seen articles that have like talked about on his Facebook page. They've actually been running segments where they like interview people, and if you look at like the way his Facebook segments with his like, advisors speaking, the way that it's been set up recently looks
Yeah, like his
eerily
Facebook
like
Live thing during the debate, it drew 9 million viewers.
But it looks eerily like a setup that you see on a cable news broadcast.
Yes, exactly, and that's what I'm getting at. I think that first night of the debate, it was a little debut of what Trump TV will look like. And even Stephen Bannon, who's Trump's campaign CEO, I don't know since when do we have executive officers for campaigns, but he admitted that Trump is beyond thinking beyond the election, and that Trump is an entrepreneur.
Well, speaking of Bannon, he's also the former CEO, whatever, of Breitbart News, which is as far right as you can go as like news media.
Well, it was. Now it's turning into the alt-right, and it's turning into the alt-right movement of people who aren't conservative. Like Andrew Breitbart was a staunch conservative, but now Breitbart is turning into something that Andrew Breitbart didn't believe in at all.
Product of Bannon.
Yeah, which was definitely a product of Bannon.
And now Bannon's running along with Kellyanne Conway. Bannon is running Trump's campaign.
Yeah.
You have...
And when he says Trump is thinking beyond the election and he's an entrepreneur, just think about it this way. Even a few 100,000 of people subscribing to Trump's TV show in the future would put him in rich territory. It would make him a lot of money. And that's what he has to do, is he has to keep pushing this myth that he'll be the answer to all this rigging going on in the media.
Yeah, and that his new network of whatever will be... So I think, yes. But the problem is with Trump, I can see... I think we both see where he's trying to go with this whole rigging thing. But I think that what he is doing is looking at his future past this election, but what he doesn't realize is that he's putting in the heads of his millions of followers that there actually is a legitimate case for rigging in the election, which just isn't true.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Just recapping, I think we're both on the same page there. That we have our differences on how the media influences elections.
Yeah.
We both agree that there's no widespread systematic rigging of the election on November 8th.
Voter fraud exists, but it's not to the extent of millions of people to where Donald Trump is claiming, which is what he's going to lose by, is over millions of votes.
All right, and then moving into our final segment today, we wanted to talk about ObamaCare and the fact that recently reports have come out saying that Obamacare premiums are to jump upwards of about 22. I know you said something that said 25. So somewhere between 22 and 25% within the year of 2015. So I think it's important to kind of just talk about Obamacare in general and why this is happening, and because I think even myself to a certain extent, I don't know. A lot of times, like, people talk about Obamacare, but I didn't know a lot of the, like, full extent of what Obamacare does and what it covers.
Oh, I knew.
So
I from the start, this is what I've been talking about, and I've been mentioning it, and even on the Morning Joe on MSNBC, they mentioned I think it was 2 mornings ago or yesterday morning, they said conservatives were right. They called it. They said that Obamacare was going to raise...
Well, I don't even think it was conservatives.
Generally speaking, the Tea Party were the people who were against it.
I think this was like a widespread thing. Like, the idea... Obama's always claimed that it would, like, lower premiums and different things. I don't think that... From what I've read, at least, I don't think a lot of people were, like, on Obama's bandwagon and saying, like, yeah, you're right.
Oh, yeah, nobody... that's why it went through executive orders. He pushed it through with tyranny and did not allow it to go through Senate, and he just curtailed the Constitution and shoved it down the American taxpayer's throat.
Yeah, I mean, again, to bring up, a Washington Post fact check, they basically rated Obama's prediction that it would lower health insurance premiums as, like, mostly untrue. Which, and if we, speaking of, like, the Washington Post, last segment, like the Washington Post tends to be a more liberal-leaning news outlet. So for them to even be saying
well,
that,
even Vox, you know what Vox is. Vox came out and completely has gone against it, and they.
Now, no, I actually listened to, there's other podcasts out there, and there's some people from Vox that have said, okay, what we kind of need this set up, but Obamacare has its issues.
Oh, definitely.
We needed something to help these lower class people find affordable health insurance, but Obamacare Obamacare in a sense helped, but it still has major issues.
Well, I mean, I like to go back to the fact that in debates and everything, and when people are talking about this, they say, "Oh, well, what are you going to do with the millions of people that are on Obamacare now? They're not going to have health care." Well, what about the millions of people who had health care before this, who are substantially a larger number than who are on Obamacare now? They got forced out of their medical plans, and they got basically
I don't think
they
anyone
lost their
was forced out of their medical plans.
Well, my dad personally, my dad was forced out of his medical plan, and he had to go to a different doctor. I also have been forced out of my doctor. I just started seeing a new physician 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then literally after the first year I saw him for my yearly checkup or whatever, I tried going back, and they're like, "Sorry, we don't accept your insurance," because Obamacare limited these insurance companies.
Yeah, but I don't think, as far as, most people that have insurance through their employer, I don't think it necessarily affected them as much. It didn't really affect them in a sense. And the idea is that, yes, these premiums are increasing, but these premiums are increasing, but basically it's the government that's paying. Obamacare is basically the government giving a subsidy to the people that sign up through the Affordable Care Act. So, well, yes, the premiums aren't increasing. It's the federal government, which I guess is, again, us, and at the end of the day, but it's the federal government that's fronting these increases in premiums. These 22 million people that are insured aren't necessarily, going to see have to pay more, basically.
Yeah, they won't at all, and it gets pushed back onto the taxpayer. And one of the main arguments of the Medicaid expansion, not similar related to Obamacare, was on the fiscal side, it would save money as people gaining Medicaid coverage would reduce their use of expensive visits to the emergency department. And then an earlier study from the Oregon Health Insurance Experiment found that getting Medicaid actually increased their number of emergency department visits by 40%.
But from what I've seen, at least, is that the Medicaid part isn't the issue. It's
it's both.
Increasing premiums on the other issue is that as they've seen a spike, you're right, they've seen the spike, is that instead of even the people that they wanted to get health insurance, that Obamacare or Obama wanted to cover under the Affordable Care Act, still aren't, even though that there's now a mandate that they have to sign up and they're paying a penalty for not signing up, they're still not signing up because they'd rather take that penalty than have to pay for expensive health insurance. But the thing is that for the 22 million Americans that have signed up, it's important to them. And
there's a way you can combat that, though. There are great ways that could work, and Dr. Ben Carson, who is a notable conservative and kind of veered off that path a little bit when he joined the Trump train, but he mentioned a great point, and I believe he would be a great spokesperson for it because he knows how the medical business works, and he knows that an empowering government overlooking the medical insurers and everything, he realizes that if you have an empowering government trying to force things down your throat like Obamacare, then it's not going to work out well. And one of the things he proposed was a medical investment. So basically you invest every bit of your paycheck into a medical savings account. So that medical savings account will build up, and in turn, you'll be able to use that when time comes, and it will decrease the emergency department visits because.
But what if you have someone that, like, say, the argument is that, a lot of young people's rationality is, oh, I don't need health insurance. So, but even if they start putting their money towards that, what about the people that aren't able to put that money away? What about the people that need that money now?
See, but that's the thing. People who need the money now, they're people who are, well, generally speaking, they're people who are working and are making paychecks. The taxes are already being taken out. So why don't you use those taxes and let somebody manage their money on their own and import it into a savings account so they can manage it, so they can be the sayer of where their money goes and how it's used, and they can use it for their own
But then you
use.
gotta go. It's like, I just don't think that. I mean, I don't think that. You have those people that. What if you burn through that money? What do you do then? Like, there's instances where, like, that. I mean, that sounds great. Like, it sounds like, oh, like, okay, like, it's the same as my savings. But the thing is, like, there's people that burn through their savings. So there's people that might burn through their medicals.
That does happen.
The issue with Obamacare is that the people that have signed up have generally been the people that are already have medical issues and need the support. The people they wanted to also sign up is the more, the young people like us and the middle class that, don't necessarily need the doctor as much. And the problem is they didn't sign up as much as they wanted to. So, I mean, one argument that Obama at least makes is that to increase the, percentage of people that can be covered or get a subsidy from Obama, because what basically happens is that, it's a tier system where the more money you make, the less subsidies you get from an Obamacare plan to, cover your health insurance. So, by the time, if you're making, if you're well off in the middle class, you're not getting any sort of subsidy by going on an Obamacare plan. But by increasing that tax credit to where it's covering more people, all of a sudden you're going to have more people signing up for Obamacare plans than you would if, it's just the poor or people that need it signing up. And that's the problem with, like, why health insurance companies are backing out, is because they're not making any money.
They literally cannot afford it. And that's why, since they're not making any money, they have to raise the premiums of their own.
Basically, in an immediate fix, or maybe a temporary fix, in my opinion, would be to raise the subsidy level so that more people are getting subsidies, because that incentivizes people to sign up more with Obamacare. But, like, I don't know. I think the biggest issue right now is that, like, both sides aren't willing to work with each other to fix Obamacare. I think the problem is the Republicans are saying, like, repeal Obamacare, repeal Obamacare,
repeal it.
Well, and you agree with that, but the problem is that 22 million people would lose their health insurance.
But that's 22 million people who didn't have health insurance to begin with.
And that's the problem, is that people are uninsured. Like, 22 million people would lose it. You'd have, all that Medicaid, retooling would be gone. Like, and just the whole debacle of trying to unfund that and then find a whole new system would be just as bad as just, like, sitting down and reworking Obamacare.
And that's what I'm trying to say is, that's what my point out was at the beginning, is that we need to repeal it, because yes, there's 22 million people on it who wouldn't have insurance, but those are 22 million people who didn't have it before. But also, you got to think about the hundreds of millions of people who lost their doctors, lost their health care, their premiums spiked.
I don't think there were hundreds of millions of people, because most people, I think it's like 180 million people, or something along those lines, already have health insurance through their workplace, on top of, like, other people that can just afford it outside of that.
But there's still. I'm not saying that they're losing their insurance and being forced to go to Obamacare. I'm saying their rates have spiked. I mean, drugs and products in the medical field have gone up in price, so medical bills are higher now. And it all leads back to, why does the government have so much involvement? I mean, it's completely different topic.
The government doesn't have, like,
the
I
government
see that
controls
you're
like
saying
40% of
the
healthcare.
government, like, does that, like, has its say, but the government doesn't have, the government is not controlling who you get your insurance through. The government is not, at least in the, if we move to a single taxpayer or healthcare system, a single payer healthcare system.
And that's what they're trying to get Obamacare to be.
Not some people are, but not necessarily. I think, then yes, the government has more control, but even the way it's set up right now, like, it doesn't affect the people that are already insured. Obamacare has no effect on the people that are already insured.
It has raised their rates. It's proven on the Cato piece. I'll link the Cato piece in the notes of the show, but in the Cato piece it shows that rates have spiked with people not only in Medicare, not only in Obamacare, but also around insurance companies are losing money, so they have to make up for it somehow. So they're going to raise their premiums.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of see conflicting stuff, but I mean, the bottom line is if you already have health insurance, it's not changing. I mean, if your rates are going up, it's because of private health insurers.
No, yes, but the private health insurers are raising the rates so they can still make money because the government is enforcing something.
And this might be a philosophical thing, but I don't think, in my philosophical mind, like, I don't think that private companies should be making a profit on the backs of people's health. And this is like where we completely differ in.
How are people going to make money then?
I don't know. I mean, I think
that's what I'm saying.
Going, but
if they're not going to make money off the backs of people, how are we going to offer insurance without, like, everything in this world costs money? So if you're going to offer insurance, it's going to cost money.
It'd be moving to a single payer healthcare system, which I know you are like.
It would not work because
above and beyond.
I'll leave this last point out here for you guys to think about, our listeners, and 40% of 40% of colleges, and, well, I don't know about colleges so much, but a majority of college is governed by the government. It's not funded by private entities, because Obama has also been putting out private universities. He's been shutting them down, and that's a completely different topic for another show. But also, it's the same thing in the medical field. The government has over 40% involvement in the medical field, and they keep pushing policies to enforce this and that and this and that, and in turn, it all leads down to one thing: more government involvement has seen increasing rates of prices, and because the government can't control what everybody needs. So, like, if you think about it, say one person assume 100 million people in the United States are greedy and steal money and take money. Well, why would you want one person? And that's assuming, like, everybody in the world is generally greedy, and greed is a natural human thing. Greed is in humans. People want money. People want nice things. It's natural in humans, and people need to combat that. And some people don't. So, what makes you think that one person who is naturally greedy in the government, and there's obviously more than one person in the government, should be able to control what these 100 million other people can do with their money?
I mean, I guess, and this will kind of be my final point. It's just that point. I guess, like, where private companies are beholden to themselves, the federal government is beholden to everyone because we elect the people that serve within government.
Yes, but it's been proven throughout history that more government means more regulations, which means more taxpayer dollars.
What I will say is kind of my final closing point is I believe that we should move more towards a single payer healthcare system, because, like, it cuts out the idea that people are making a profit off of you being able to get the needs that you need, your health needs. But I understand that people in this country don't necessarily, like, not everyone, a lot of people, most people in this country disagree with kind of that philosophy. Now, so where do we find a middle ground then? And I think Obamacare to a certain extent is that middle ground, but I think that, like, you know, you had to get something off the ground. And Obamacare was that. Obamacare is flawed and it has its issues, but the idea that we should take a step back and go back to where we were, in my mind, doesn't work well. But I guess we can just agree to disagree. And that's the point of this show, is we want to present both sides of the argument for people that are listening. And I think this segment that we just did was a classic example of what we kind of want to do. You know, have a, you know, productive discussion and see, you know, each argument and see where each side is coming from.
Yeah, I think it was a good conversation and a good debate. I thoroughly enjoy good debates, and I think it's great that I think the past couple of years people have been so respondent to the other side of the political party is just like pushing them off, and they haven't talked about it civilly like we just did today.
Or immediately, yes, like people are like, no, you're wrong, and that's the extent of their discussion before
they
just start yelling at each
facts
other.
or anything,
yeah.
And I think it's been a problem in this country, and I think that's a way we can combat it is what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. All right, that wraps up our second episode. If you're listening, thanks for listening and dealing with our growing pains as we try to get this off the ground and running. We will see you in episode 3.
Sunday.